Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's webinar. We're going to be doing the checklist for securing remote workers, and this is the second part of a two-part series that we did just a couple of weeks ago. And today, though, we have both Tracy Wetherington. Good afternoon, Tracy.
Hey, good afternoon, Kevin. Happy to be here.
Yep, and we also have Ryan Lowell that's going to be joining us this time. Hey, Ryan, how you doing?
Good afternoon, Kevin.
All right, so what we're going to be covering today is the security features that are included with the M365 SKU. I know that we talked a little bit about that in the first one. We're just going to be doing some reviewing that. Configuring team security, and this is a big deal out there. Governance, everything about external chats, everything you can think of about teams will be in here, meeting policies and so on. And then we're going to talk about managing devices, including app protection policies, block and allow access and device compliance, securing remote access for third-party cloud apps. These are desktop apps and on-prem web apps also. And then we're going to go through that checklist that we talked about for securing remote workers. And it's really just an add-on to what we covered in the first one. And then there's going to be an question and answer session at the end. But just to do a little housekeeping here, you can ask questions along the way. All you got to use is the GoToWebinar interface that you have on your desktop. There's a question section in there. I'll be monitoring it as Tracy and Ryan goes through their information. Ask a question along the way. I'll try to make sure I include it during that segment of the presentation. It works out best that way. I also have just a couple of poll questions. We find that these are really useful to help our presenters make sure they really target in on exactly what you guys want to hear today. And the first question is a pretty easy one. Did you attend the first session that we actually had for the first session for remote users? So right now, it's pretty even, about 50-50 here. With 60% in, it's pretty close to 50-50. So it looks like some people did, some people didn't. So I'm just going to close it. It's exactly 50-50 with Perfect. 65%, 70% of the vote in. So just so you know, Trace, we weren't that popular the first time. No, I'm only kidding.
Or we ran them away on the second one. There you go.
Yeah. Well, hey, half of them came back. What can I tell you? All right. So the other question we have is, do you have SCCM right now in your business? So looking at this with about 30% in, wow, it's a 1/3 yes, 2/3 no. 50% in, about the same thing, Trace, just so you know.
Okay.
And just a couple more seconds here. So it looks like, Tracy, 1/3 of the people have System Center, 2/3 don't, just so you have an idea of what we have out there. Third question, you can see these are real quick questions. MDM, do you guys use right now a mobile device manager? If you use Intune, great, third party, or none at all. So it looks like here, majority of the people are none at all with 50% in. And then the other two are pretty evenly split between Intune and a third party with 60% of the vote in. It looks like 62% none, and the others are pretty well balanced between third party and Intune, just so you know that. All right, we only have, I promise, just two other quick questions, both about Teams. When did you roll out Teams? 2 years ago, 1 year ago, 6 months, 3 months, or you've never rolled it out? So just looking through the thing here, it looks like most people are between 1 year and 6 months, Ryan, somewhere in that ballpark. About 4% of the people don't have it right now. It looks like, 96% of the people, 97% of the people have Teams in there. And I would say the majority of them are 1 year or more. So just so you have an idea of what we got here. And then the last question, real quick, is how comfortable are you with the security within Teams. So are you very comfortable with how you have security set up? Are you somewhat comfortable or not at all? So here we got about 65% say somewhat, 10% say very. So most of the people probably need a little bit of help, and that's why I'm sure they're on this webinar today. So great, with 60% of the vote in, about 81% of it or 91% of it are either not at all or somewhat, just so you have an idea as we go through the presentation. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Tracy first, and let's start walking through what we have for them today. Trace, what do you got?
Hey guys, thanks for joining our webinar today. Hopefully you had a chance to review series 1 or part 1 of this webinar series around checklists for securing remote workers. Here's a little information about myself. I've been working in this industry for a little over 25 plus years. If you have time, stop and read the bio. Been doing this for a while. I also like to introduce Mr. Ryan Lowell. He's going to be talking with us about teams and governance around teams later in the presentation, so we'll kind of just be handing off during the presentation. So today I wanted to do a quick refresh on one of the parts that we covered in the first series of this webinar. What's included with the Microsoft 365 E5 license. I just want to also point out there's very subtle differences between the E3 and the E5. The E5 gives you a little bit more around threat protection, a little more around analytics, and it gives you a little bit more around Teams and voice calling. So let's kind of jump right in to where we left off on the last webinar and what's included. So I've actually abbreviated this a little bit today, and I want to focus specifically around security, around what's included with the M365 E5 SKU. Now again, don't let this confuse you with the Office 365 E5 SKU. This is a different SKU. This is the Microsoft 365 E5. So what's included with that? I get this question all the time. We see a lot of clients out there in the field today that have M365 E5 licenses, and we start having these conversations around security. How are you governing your end users? How are you deploying workstations today? Is your Azure and Office 365 environments up to date and meeting all the best practices, Microsoft and industry best practices around security? And a lot of customers don't realize that they actually have all these tools available to them as part of the M365 E5 SKU. So let's kind of break it down into some major categories. One of my favorites, of course, is device and app management. One of my favorite areas, we're going to dig, as the presentation proceeds, we're going to dig a little bit more into Intune and SCCM and understand what comes to the table with that. But with the E5, you actually get the M365 Admin Center, of course, and you get Intune, which, of course, I don't know if you guys know, but Intune and SCCM have been rebranded as Endpoint Manager. So when SCCM and Intune are put in a co-managed state, all sorts of new portals open up for you in Azure, allowing you to essentially manage your on-prem environment and your remote workforce through a single pane of glass. Opens up all sorts of new opportunities for you. The addition to device and app management, you get Windows Autopilot through Intune. Intune's included in this E5 licensing. So if you have a need to deploy a computer to a remote worker who rarely ever comes into the office, you can actually order that computer directly from the OEM like Dell, Lenovo, or HP, send it directly to that end user. The minute they power it on and connect it to the internet, Autopilot is going to speak to Intune. Intune is then automatically going to enroll the device in Azure AD and traditional AD. They've made that functionality available now too, so we can do traditional AD join as well as hybrid Azure AD join through Autopilot. It's going to download all the applications and settings that user needs, and off they go up and running. Zero touch, zero intervention by your IT staff. It just works really, really well. The other key pieces that I wanted to cover around what's included in the M365 license from a security standpoint is identity and access management. With this license, you get Windows Hello, Credential Guard, and Direct Access. So what is Windows Hello, right? So I'm sure most of you, if you have a laptop or portable device or tablet, You can utilize your fingerprint, you can do facial recognition, and you can do a PIN in order to access that device. More of the modern management around remote users today is trying to do away with the passwords, right? By utilizing Windows Hello for Business, which is included with the EPHI, you're able to authenticate your remote users using facial recognition, fingerprint, PIN. It just makes it a lot simpler when trying to manage those remote workers. Also included in the E5 is Azure AD Premium 1 and Azure AD Premium 2. We're going to go in a little bit more depth about what those services bring to the table here in the next few slides. Then we've got threat protection. This is where it really gets kind of deep around Microsoft Advanced Threat Analytics. Where are the attacks coming from in your environment? Who's trying to get into your Azure environment? What threats are you aware of trying to get on-prem to your devices? What threats are being exposed to your remote users? This is where advanced threat analytics really shines. It helps you as an administrator or manager of your environment understand where these threats are coming from. As part of that threat protection, you get Windows Defender Antivirus and Device Guard. You get Defender Advanced Threat Protection. Of course, this is essentially the AV version, antivirus version that Microsoft deploys on all of its workstations. In addition to that, you also get threat protection inside your Office 365 suite and Azure. So the whole threat protection suite not only covers the in workstation, but it also covers all your remote workers, your on-prem environment, and your Azure cloud environment.
Hey, Trace, before you go on that, I got a bunch of people that are asking. They have the E3 SKU, the M365 E3, and the documentation from Microsoft really doesn't point out what they don't get with E3 that are in E5. Would you happen to know what those features are?
I do some. I can actually, at the end of this presentation, send you a link where it actually shows you the actual breakdowns. But I think the significant difference is with the E5, you get a little bit more of the advanced analytics like Power BI Pro. And I think you get more additional voice and telephony capabilities in Teams versus the E3. They're very, very similar.
I know you get Cloud PBX and PSTN calling in those things, but
That's
I thought there was a couple security things that weren't in there either.
Yeah, just a few, not many. It's very, very close, but I can send out the URL that actually shows you line item by line item what's included with the E3 versus the E5. We can include that as an attachment.
Yeah, we'll include that along with the presentation and a link to the recording. Great, thanks, Trace.
Yeah, no problem. So what else is included with the E5, right? Information protection. Wow, in today's world, data loss protection is extremely important. We don't need employees or staff, sending out social security numbers, credit card numbers, confidential HR information. That's where DLP or data loss protection around Office 365 is extremely important. Understanding what employees are sending, especially if you're working in a remote location, they're not being closely supervised. We need to keep an eye on how is our data being transmitted. DLP is perfect for this, for monitoring credit cards, social security numbers, personal ID information. That's where DLP really does shine. Windows Information Protection and BitLocker. Oh, BitLocker is huge when we're talking about managing a remote workforce. Of course, we've never had an employee, lose a laptop or lose a tablet. Of course, that never happens. Well, when it does, is that information now available to whoever stole the laptop? BitLocker is huge around this area. We need to make sure those drives are encrypted and the data is safe in case the laptop is stolen or lost or destroyed in some way. That information left on that drive is extremely secure. Again, a very key thing to keep in mind when managing your remote workforce. With SCCM and or with Intune, we can manage your BitLocker configuration in order to ensure that those machines are locked down. And again, we briefly touched on Azure P1 and P2. We're going to talk about that in just a few more minutes. And then cloud app security. So Ryan's going to talk a little bit more about cloud app security later on in the presentation. So I'm going to jump on over to security management. What I like about what Microsoft has done is they've made this super simple for all of us to look at what is our security score. Microsoft provides a very nice, easy to read dashboard called Microsoft Secure Score that simply lays out where you can improve your security footprint. If you don't have MFA, multi-factor authentication turned on for your administrators, it will point that out to you. Not only will it point that out to you, but it will also provide you guidance on how to enable MFA for your administrators. If you're an organization that has to have, let's say, HIPAA compliance or ISO compliance, they now have a compliance center inside the security suite. So if you go to the compliance center and you say, what am I doing right and what am I doing wrong in order to meet HIPAA compliance? Inside that compliance center, it will actually spell out for you, here are the things you're compliant with, here are the things that you are not compliant with, and here's how to get yourself in alignment with the compliance standard. It spells it out for you step by step. And of course, then we have the advanced compliance, right? So we have advanced e-discovery, very important, right? So if you're HIPAA compliant, you need to go back and you need to review emails, or you need to look at data, or you need to look at chats that may have occurred between employees referencing a certain situation. The advanced e-discovery has that capability. And then of course, we've already briefly touched on encryption. The other key part of this is privileged access management. If you have a remote workforce today, you don't necessarily want those remote workers to always have full global admin rights inside your Azure or Office 365 tenant. Having privileged access management grants them rights, let's say between 8 a.m. and 12 o'clock noon. And if once that window is closed, that access is then shut down and restricted. Privileged access management goes a long ways in securing your remote workforce. So when they're connecting to Azure or connecting to Office 365 or connecting to your sensitive data, we can restrict that time window that they have those administrative privileges. And again, that's called privileged access management. The other key thing that comes along with the E5 is My Analytics and Power BI Pro. So if you want to take all of your data, let's say from SCCM or Intune, and create nice graphical representations and gather that data and put it in the graphical view for your management team, Power BI Pro really comes to the forefront in being able to display that data to your management team. So just a quick
got a question for you, Trace. Go back. Oh, you're going to go through this. Good. They just wanted to know what the difference was between P1 and P2.
Well, here you go. And this is where we're going to do the breakdown right here of Azure P1 and P2. So Azure AD Premium 1 is the enterprise level edition, which provides identity management for both on-prem users, remote users, and hybrid users, accessing applications both locally and over the cloud. This edition includes support for self-service identity, self-service password reset, essentially what that means, access management, administration of dynamic groups, including self-service group management, as well as Microsoft MIM, Microsoft Identity Manager, which is a suite of on-premise identity and access management tools. So you get that capability in P1. With P2, you get everything that's in P1 with the addition of identity protection and privileged identity management, which we just kind of talked about, PIM, which is privileged identity management. Identity protection provides management of conditional access to apps and critical data. PIM enhances the management of privileged accounts tied to administrative access to resources. So P2, again, P1 and P2 are very, very similar. P2 just adds some extra capabilities here. So this is the official breakdown directly from Microsoft. All right, so what's included? We kind of touch base on some of these things. And again, this is kind of a refresher for those of you who joined the first conference, but MFA, again, one of the biggest things that we push here is multi-factor authentication. With Microsoft technology, you can use your Microsoft Authenticator app, you can use Windows Hello, you can use a FIDO2 security key, you can use biometrics, we can do push notifications, we can do text messages, and we can do soft and hard tokens to enforce multi-factor authentication. If you have remote users out in the field today and you're not using MFA, we strongly recommend doing that. what's difference? What's the available versions of MFA versus licensing? I'm certainly not going to read through this chart today. This is here for your information, but this gives you the breakdown of the different capabilities of MFA based on your licensing model. This slide that's included here is also a breakdown of the different features included in AD Premium 1 and Premium 2 versus the Office 365 E3 and E5. Again, these are great reference materials. Also included, we briefly talked about this, is advanced threat protection, right? So again, kind of a review from the last webinar, but this is a breakdown of what's included, in Defender ATP. We've got threat and vulnerability management, attack surface reduction, endpoint detection and response, secure score, and the Microsoft threat experts. What I like about this is the way ATP works, advanced threat protection. It's not just looking at your company. Advanced threat protection is a service by Microsoft that they're analyzing data from all over the world and from various different companies and customers. All that information is being analyzed to help defend you against an attack. So how do we deploy, Defender ATP? Defender ATP can be deployed through SCCM. It can also be deployed, and of course, inside SCCM, we're able to provide you with a console of the health, general health of your environment. And we can also deploy advanced threat protection through Intune. The device and app management can all be controlled and managed through the Azure console. Here's an example of, here's your exposure score, here's your configuration score, here's your severity of this, here are your top recommendations. All of this is part of that advanced threat protection. So guys, I know I kind of skimmed over quite a bit of that. I want to stay conscious of time and give Ryan an opportunity to start talking to us more in depth around Microsoft Teams security and governance. Now, if you're looking for more information on what we just covered in what's in the MSKU, as well as deeper dive into advanced threat protection and MFA, conditional access, please refer back to the previous webinar, series 1 of this series. Ryan, all you, buddy.
Thanks, Tracy. Yeah, so we wanted to go through a little bit of a deep dive into Teams security and governance. We specifically wanted to spend some time on this because this has been really top of mind for a lot of organizations, especially with COVID. A lot of organizations out there are moving into Teams in a short amount of time, or organizations that have been in Teams in more of an informal way and just haven't had a lot of attention paid to it, are suddenly finding that it's a very important tool for the current environment. So we wanted to spend some time talking about some of the security and governance tools around Teams and what you have access to. And there are a lot of considerations around it, both from a management of Teams as well as a security perspective with Teams. So we have to think about, who do we want to be able to create teams? For those of you who are in the administration side of things, you know that a team comes with a lot of other things with it. Creates SharePoint sites and global address list entries and OneNote notebooks and all kinds of different things. So we need to have a handle on who can create them, how can we grant and deny those permissions. We also need to make sure we stay compliant. We need to make sure that we're not sharing sensitive information. Tracy mentioned HIPAA, PCI, SOC compliance. We need to make sure that we've got our compliance enforced on our teams as we move things into them. We need to control lifecycle. We have seen a lot of organizations that have team sprawl. They've turned on Teams and they come back a year later and look in their Teams portal and suddenly there's 1,000 teams and there's teams for people going to get coffee on Thursday afternoon. So you got to make sure that we control the life cycle of those teams, prevent them from getting sprawled out and spreading your information and your conversations and things too widely. There's also some major considerations around external access to Teams, allowing your users to chat with people outside your organization and allowing people to come inside your organization, joining as guests within your own teams, which has a whole set of considerations by itself for security, governance, monitoring, making sure that people who are coming into your house aren't making a mess. And then we need to understand where people are logging in from, what we can do to protect that data. How can we see what people are doing? We've had a lot of customers approach us and say, hey, you know, we've spread our workforce out. We've sent everybody home. How can we monitor what's going on inside of our teams? And then, just like everything else, we need to have a plan to back up our data. And just because we've moved it to the cloud doesn't mean that it doesn't need a backup anymore. It just means we need to approach it a little bit differently. So we want to talk a few things about that. So when it comes to Teams lifecycle, this is going to be controlled using PowerShell for team creation. There is actually no control out there to enable or disable someone from creating a team itself. What you can do is prevent them from creating an Office 365 group. Office 365 groups are the underlying unit for a team. So if you stop somebody from creating groups, then you stop them from creating a team. And that has to be done today via PowerShell. There's no GUI control. It's not in the Teams admin center anywhere. So I do have a link down at the bottom that we'll share with everybody to link to that Microsoft Doc article. They even give you some example PowerShell that you can use to help lock that down. What we typically do is we'll grant permission to a security group in Office 365. We'll call it Team Creators. And that way you can very easily add and remove people to that group when they need to be able to create teams, so that you're not limiting it to IT, putting it back on IT's plate every time somebody needs to create a team. As everybody knows, Teams is a very self-serve application. So we don't want to, by putting these security controls in place, put things back on the IT department to be responsible for everything that goes on in Teams. We want the users to be able to do self-service, but we want to have smart controls around that. Controlling team sprawl. So we can limit people from creating teams, but how do you stop the existing teams from going outside of control? You can actually do that in Azure Active Directory, and you're going to see a common theme here. Not everything about Teams governance happens in Teams admin. It happens in Azure Active Directory. So setting an Azure AD group expiration will set a lifetime for those teams. And when the lifetime is approaching, the team owner gets notified and they can go and extend that lifetime if that team is still being actively used. But that helps you mow the grass and make sure that things don't grow out of control too far. And then, just like anything else in your email, you need to make sure that for compliance reasons that we're retaining the data inside of Teams. There are controls inside of the Office 365 Compliance Center under the Policies section and Retention. That's going to allow you to not only put in place all your traditional retention policies like your Exchange, your SharePoint, your Office 365 groups, but now there's an option in there to set retention rules for Teams channel messages and for Teams chats. So you need to make sure, if you've gone in there and kind of set it and forget it for your compliance policies before you had Teams come into the organization, you want to make sure that you go in there, make sure that you're retaining those channel messages and those chats. And those are actually kept, believe it or not, inside of Exchange. Your Teams chats are kept in your users' Exchange mailboxes, but they're in a separate folder that isn't subject to the normal compliance rules, so you need to make sure you go and set those policies. All right, now let's talk about external users, people coming into our house. We want to make sure they don't track mud on the carpet. So there's two kinds of external access inside of Teams. You have external access, and that's specifically for the Teams chat. That you have direct control over inside of the Teams admin center, whether that's on or off. You can choose whether or not your users can communicate with Skype. And in the case of the second control that you see on the right there, that's actually the personal version of Skype. So not only can users chat with people on Teams outside of the organization, but they can chat with people in Skype for Business, and they can chat with people in Skype Personal if you don't have that control turned off. So you have to be aware that that's something that you can control. You also can limit by domain. So you can block specific domains from chatting with you, or you can allow specific domains to chat with you. The only thing to know there is if you allow a single domain, you are now on the allow plan. You have to allow everybody who communicates. Allowing one domain will block all others unless you explicitly allow them. So you do need to be mindful of that. But the external chat is not terribly impactful from a security perspective, at least not from a, risking your files and breaches and things like that, because the external chat is a little bit more abbreviated than the internal chat, as you can't do things like sharing files and see each other's organization charts and things like that. it's still, you can have them chat and share secure information. So you want to maybe apply your DLP policies and things like that to your teams, but it's less of a security concern for your external chat. The same is not true for guest access. Guest access allows outside users to become internal guests in your internal teams. So as you can imagine, that's a much larger security concern. You've got files inside of those teams, which that person as a member of the team will now be able to access. You've got apps, which those people will be able to touch. So you do have a larger security exposure when you're allowing guest access. And you do have the ability to turn it on and off inside of the Teams admin center. And there are some extra settings. You can treat your external guests a little bit differently in terms of, whether people are allowed to delete their own chats and things like that. But there are a lot more controls inside of Azure Active Directory. And the reason that is because when you invite a guest in Teams, you're not just sending an invitation to join Teams, you're sending an invitation to join your Azure Active Directory as a guest user. So you can actually, there are controls in there where you can limit who's permitted to send those guest invitations. Maybe you want to keep a tighter control on that. Only allow certain people, guest inviters, to send out those invitations so that anybody can't just come into your organization, into your teams, and start participating unless they're doing it in an organized way. And then you can leverage conditional access in Azure Active Directory Premium, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. That lets you put some additional controls over who and how and what people are able to do when they're logging into Teams. All right, and then in terms of keeping an eye on Teams and backing the data up, there are some basic activity reports inside of your Office 365 portal and inside the Teams Admin Center. We didn't think that was robust enough. We didn't get enough data from those activity reports. So actually, Champion put together a ProTippity Insights dashboard. This is on our website. This is a free tool. And what this actually does is goes and grabs information from the Microsoft Graph API, and it will give you more in-depth reporting on your users' activity, how many chats, how many meetings they've been taking place, how many private groups they're in. A lot of extra information in there that's not available inside of the Teams Admin Center. So we wanted to get that up and make that available to our customers and actually anyone. This is a free tool. So encourage you guys to go and take advantage of that.
So especially for those people, Ryan, that don't have maybe the PowerShell skills, because all this stuff is available, we're just making it much easier for them to be able to see these reports, schedule these reports, and so on, right?
Absolutely. You can get this information in a couple of clicks. And the format that we make it available to you is Power BI. So that anybody who knows Power BI, you can slice and dice the data yourself. You can drill down for more information. You can pull it out very easily into something like an Excel spreadsheet if you wanted to manipulate that data as well. So very, very powerful tool. I'm really glad that we got it out there for everybody. So I think everybody should take advantage of that. And then just like anything else, we need to back things up inside of Teams. And Microsoft does not provide any kind of backup for Teams. End of sentence. They do give you things that we've had traditionally, like retention policies, but a retention policy just prevents people from deleting something. It doesn't necessarily allow you to bring it back very easily or at all. So we depend on third-party services to back up Skykick or to back up Teams. There's one in particular that we really like, which is called Skykick. There are several others through Veeam and a couple of other third parties that have been getting these solutions out there. But a good backup for Teams is going to back up your document libraries, your conversations, your SharePoint sites, your OneDrive files, your Exchange mailboxes, even in your Office 365 groups for your chat and channel conversations. So just because you're moving these things up into the cloud, they're not on a traditional server anymore, please don't leave the backup behind. I've seen any number of circumstances where people have kind of rushed things to the cloud and not gotten that backup regime in place and gotten themselves into trouble. So yeah.
Brian, let me ask you a question about backup here for a second. Backup's great. What about restore? I mean, I hear everybody talk about backup, but how easy is it to restore things back into the Office 365 environment?
With something like Skykick, it's maybe 2 clicks. Extremely simple to do restoration. And that's really why you want a backup product versus relying on retention policies, because retention policies, anybody who's tried to go through a restore from things that are just being grabbed by retention policies knows that's a long, painful process with a lot of shortcomings. So these third-party solutions like Skykick, you go into the portal, find what you're looking for, a couple of clicks, it pops back into your tenant, and you're good to go. So that's a much easier situation to be in. All right, Tracy, and I think I'm going to hand it back to you for, oh, I'm sorry, one last thing. So as we said, there's been a lot of interest around Teams, and especially with the environment as it's been with all the COVID stuff, people working from home. So we've got a lot of services around this. We've got our Teams Jumpstart. That's really a very rapid offering for us to help you get up and running with Teams very quickly, or to organize your existing deployment if maybe it isn't as secure or isn't as organized as you want it to be. Both I and Kevin have been going through tons of end user training. We've done probably several hundred hours just since February on getting staff up to speed on how they can use that to work remotely. We've got sessions for executives and exec assistants. And again, we've got that Skykick backup so that we can help you back up your data.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan. That was awesome information. Good to hear. Certainly, I'm sure I'll get some more additional questions at the end of this. So guys, I wanted to go ahead and jump into the next session, which is, managing devices utilizing Intune and SCCM. So Kevin did, a poll initially. How many people are using an MDM solution? It's good to know that those of you who are using it. Those who are not, you should consider definitely looking at Intune, considering it is part of the M365 E3 and E5 SKU. I get a lot of questions today about, well, what can Intune do? What can it do? Please read this at your convenience. But one of the areas on this slide that I definitely wanted to cover was what it cannot see and what it can see. We've deployed Intune many times from Champion for our customers. And a lot of the end users kind of get a little nervous about that. Is Big Brother looking at what I'm doing? What can they do to my phone? So what's important is what they cannot see, right? We can't see call history, your text messages, personal email, personal contacts, personal calendar, personal web history, your location, your camera roll, which is extremely important, personal data, personal apps, and passwords. We cannot see that information on a BYOD device. So if you have a user who has an iPhone, an Android, etc., we cannot see that information via Intune. What we can see is the owner, the device name, the serial number, manufacturer, model, operating system, and any company apps you've installed. Typically, when we deploy Intune, we also deploy the Outlook app to support Office 365. That gives us control over company data, company email, and allows us to manipulate that device. If that employee decides to leave the company or is terminated, we have the ability to remote wipe company data only. So that's kind of critical understanding that. So how does Intune affect me? How do we change how we're doing business, right? Again, this is more focused on all of your remote users, and even if you're not technically classified as a remote user, chances are you have a mobile device. But I also wanted to point out that even though Intune is classified as MDM or mobile device management now includes a Windows 10 tablet, a Windows 10 laptop. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a cellular device. So how does this affect me? So first off, you want to enroll in Intune. Setup is pretty easy. It's going to give you access to the company network, company email, and other work files. How do we authenticate? This kind of goes back to some of the Windows Hello that we originally discussed in the first part of this session. So you can have a PIN, a password, biometric authentication, and all of that keeps your device safe. Get applications, right? Very important. What if you have a custom application inside your company, or you want to use Outlook or Office 365 or Azure? You can actually receive company approved apps from the Intune company portal, and it's managed right there you can do it through the managed Google Play Store. You can also use the iTunes Store as well to publish and push applications to a user's device. What if you have a policy, let's say, that you don't want people having the WhatsApp, texting, and instant messenger application because it's known to have spyware built into it? You can actually create a policy in Intune that says you're not allowed to have that app if you want to use your own BYOD device. Troubleshooting, again, makes it easy for the end user, especially the remote end user. So it gives them the ability to do self-service troubleshooting directly from the company portal. And of course, more importantly is security. In case that device is lost or stolen, we can take steps to safeguard that data or do selective wipes against that particular device. Now, if the device is company owned, we can actually do a full wipe if we initiate that. So what you need to know, right? First off, definitely get your devices enrolled if you already have Intune. Intune supports Android work profiles. It supports Mac OS. Obviously, it supports Windows. It supports iOS. We can support Mac. Basically, any of those different tools or operating systems are available to be managed by Intune. And again, what happens if you lose your phone or tablet? Even as a remote user, if the remote user cannot get word to the administrator of your company, hey, I've lost my tablet, I've lost my phone, the end users can actually log right into their portal in Intune and say, my phone has been lost, and have that device logged as being lost or stolen. Very key, especially with these remote users out in the field today. So some of the other things that I wanted to bring to your attention are System Center Configuration Manager. Again, this has more or less been rebranded as Endpoint Manager. When you put SCCM and Intune in a code-managed state, it gives you the ability to manage, again, your on-prem infrastructure, including servers, gives you the ability to do imaging, gives you the ability to do autopilot, which we briefly touched. But more importantly, it kind of streamlines the management of your systems. If you own the M365E3 or M365E5, you now own System Center Configuration Manager. If you don't have one of those licenses, but just simply own System Center Configuration Manager, you now own Intune licenses for that same amount of users. So again, we can have a licensing discussion, but chances are you may already own licenses for Intune and or be in a position to start utilizing System Center. So what does it streamline, right? So it streamlines deployment of applications, managing Windows updates, remediation devices for compliance. We can set compliance levels on your devices. So in order for a device to connect to the network or connect to resources, they must have the latest flavor of the antivirus software, or they must have a specific application or configuration done to their device. Obviously, one of the biggest things that's handy is monitoring hardware and software inventory. Even if you have a remote user, we can remote control that user using the cloud management gateway through SCCM. So if you're a home user sitting behind a home Netgear router, we can still do remote control of that workstation utilizing Azure and the cloud management gateway, deploy applications, and get control over that workstation that's company owned. We can deploy and upgrade operating systems. We can maintain a desired state configuration. Again, that's sort of the same thing as remediating the devices for compliance. And more importantly, I think it maximizes your productivity. I've seen administrators manage literally thousands of PCs with just a couple people utilizing SCCM and Intune. It just makes things so much easier and puts all those tools in one place. So for those of you who do not know Configuration Manager, I'm going to play this short little video here for you. It's from the Microsoft Mechanics website. It's a great YouTube video that actually is very interesting and helps you better understand the capabilities of SCCM. Again, now branded Endpoint Manager.
In today's on-the-go inclusive workplace, people need to work from their own devices, access the best platforms and applications available, and securely connect to corporate data from anywhere. But using separate PC management and MDM solutions to enable your employees eats up IT resources and limits your efficiency. What if with one tool you could get to Windows 10 fast, keep all your software up to date, and control employee access to corporate apps and data on PCs, servers, and mobile devices from a single console? By integrating System Center Configuration Manager with Microsoft Intune, you can achieve that. First, Getting to Windows 10 is easier than ever before because Configuration Manager now gives you faster deployment of Windows 10 with in-place upgrade, provisioning packages, and Azure AD Join to easily enroll both company and employee-owned devices, plus all the traditional deployment methods you've used in the past. Once you've upgraded, Windows 10 updates are controlled directly from your management console. Configurable deployment rings give you the flexibility to choose when updates are installed across different groups within your organization. And since Windows 10 is moving faster than ever, Configuration Manager is designed with more frequent and easier to install updates to support new Windows, Configuration Manager, and mobile device management capabilities at a much faster pace. Configuration Manager also enables more ways to manage all of your devices and applications in a way that works the best for your organization. From a single console, you can configure and enforce security policies, deploy and manage applications, manage all PCs, servers, IoT, and mobile devices using a traditional agent, as well as via the cloud or on-prem MDM, and get insight into your environment with powerful dashboard and reporting capabilities. You are no longer limited by separate PC management and MDM solutions. With Configuration Manager and Microsoft Intune, you can get to Windows 10 fast, keep it up to date, and manage all of your devices from one central location. Learn more and try it yourself for free at microsoft.com/configmgr.
All right, guys, I thought that was an excellent video that just kind of summarizes what do you get with it with SCCM and Intune, and how do you make that happen? And the best way to make that happen is to put SCCM and Intune in a code management state. Now, what this diagram is basically showing you, whether your devices are on-premise or on the internet, having Intune and SCCM in a code management state, we can balance the workloads and create a single pane of glass to manage those endpoints. So what do we offer around SCCM? We offer health checks. We provide upgrade and migration validation. We also do plan and design. We actually have a lot of customers who are very knowledgeable around SCCM. It's not terribly difficult to install. Where some of the difficulties come in is actually designing SCCM. We have a lot of customers who come in, we go in, help them lay out the design, identify where the primary site server will be, help them get Intune set up in a code managed state, help them get it up and going. And we can do a lot of this for you guys in a 40-hour quick start. If you're still doing operating system deployments or need help packaging applications, whether it be an SCCM or Intune, we offer services around that too. So Mr. Ryan, you are up, sir, for securing remote access, including third-party cloud apps and on-prem.
Thanks, Tracy, and I'm going to try to move through this a little quickly because I want to leave some time for questions, but we're going to talk a little bit about how we secure those apps and data. And the primary channel by which we do that is through Azure Active Directory. You know, that's your cloud-based identity provider. So Azure Active Directory is the cloud version of AD. It does synchronize with your on-prem AD using AD Connect, and there's a couple of different flavors of that. You know, you can use your password hash synchronization, or you can pass through authentication, or do your traditional ADFS, although that's making its way towards the door. The new password sync and pass-through authentication are just much simpler, much easier ways to go about doing that, require a lot less infrastructure. And there are also ways that you can connect your on-prem apps. If you have on-prem apps, on-prem web apps, there is the Azure Active Directory app proxy. So you can forward those requests to log in from your local apps to Azure Active Directory. Works with your single sign-on, so you can have your users log in once and have access to all of their local apps as well as the cloud. And speaking of single sign-on, Azure Active Directory has access to something like 3,400, I think it's 3,470 third-party cloud apps. You can use and control your login to those apps directly through Azure Active Directory. That can be your central identity provider. And of course, you've got all that great reporting and auditing capability inside of Azure AD. Having all of your different apps connected to that and seeing what everybody's doing is a really, really powerful thing. Now, Active Directory Premium, you guys asked a question earlier on, you know, what's the difference between Premium 1, Premium 2? it does bring some seriously powerful extra features. You know, either of the AD premiums give you access to a better multi-factor authentication than comes with Office 365. The premium ones also give you access to using things like hardware tokens. So if you've got your YubiKeys and your other types of physical hardware tokens that you want to use for login, you can use those. And then we're going to talk about conditional access and identity protection, which are two of the major features that you get. Conditional access policies, I think, are one of the most powerful things in Azure Active Directory and Office 365. What conditional access is a set of if-then rules. If these certain conditions are met, then my users can log in or under certain conditions. So what this lets you do is set smarter, more responsive policies for security. You know, when we're talking about locking down environments, you know, we always have to deal with the security seesaw. You know, if you push down really hard on security, you lose the convenience. If you push down on convenience, you lose the security. What conditional access and some of the services around it lets you do is bump up the security without losing some of the convenience, because we can be smart about it. We can allow or block based on certain conditions. So for example, multi-factor authentication, like Tracy said, blocks 99.9% of breach attempts, but it's kind of annoying. It's kind of a pain in the butt if you have to do multi-factor prompts all day. We can do things like connecting it to that endpoint manager that Tracy was just talking about. If you're logging in from a compliant device, registered device with your organization, you can actually set up a conditional access policy that says, if Tracy logs in from a managed device, allow him to log in, don't require multi-factor authentication. But if Steve is logging in from a home unregistered, unmanaged device or an unfamiliar IP address, require multi-factor from him. So that's the core of it. It lets you set rules around which you can have people log into your web apps. Also,
so Ryan, are you saying, so if we don't have any employees sitting in China or Russia, we shouldn't be allowing logins from China or Russia? It should all be in the US or our specific area, right?
Absolutely. You can limit by location. You can limit by safe IP address, trusted IP addresses. You can require access from specific apps or browsers. So if you only want them logging in through the mobile Office 365 apps rather than like the native iPhone email app, you can require that.
Awesome.
And the important thing, especially as it relates to guest access in Teams, is that these rules can apply to users outside of your organization as well, and you don't need to license them directly. For every one user in your organization that's licensed for this, you can apply those rules to up to 5 external guests. So very, very powerful, and it gets even better when you plug it into other things in Office 365. So Azure Conditional Access is one of those P1, the premium P1 features. Premium P2 adds on identity protection. And what this is Microsoft's Graph API and all their machine learning, watching the activity and the behavior of your users and assigning them a risk score. So Microsoft gets, I actually got a chance to visit the Microsoft security office out in Redmond. They get something like 6.5 trillion security signals a day, and that all feeds into this threat intelligence. So they're watching for things like people logging in from anonymous IP addresses, signing in from unfamiliar devices, logging in from IP addresses that are linked with malware. They're looking for leaked credentials. If you have your credentials synchronized to the cloud, Microsoft's got their red teams out there looking for breached credentials. If they find some credentials that match what you guys have in the cloud, they're going to shut your user down and say, this is a high-risk user with breached credentials. You don't want him logging into your access, into your applications. And this connects to conditional access. So we can say, hey, if you're logging in from a company-managed device, you've got a low identity risk score, come on in. We're not even going to bother hitting you with the MFA prompt. If you're logging in from a medium risk score account, we're going to let you in, but we're going to hit you with that multi-factor prompt just to make sure you are who you say you are. And if you've got a high identity risk score, lock that account out, don't allow them to access cloud resources from anywhere, and notify the IT team so that they can go and remediate that breach. So very, very powerful things that you can add on to conditional access. Now, this is something that's in that AD Premium P2, so you've got to have one of the E5 SKUs, either Microsoft 365 E5, EMS E5 or the Microsoft 365 Security E5 to get access to that. All right, and then we've got Cloud App Security. Cloud App Security is Microsoft's CASB, their Cloud App Security broker. For those that aren't familiar, what this is this has you log in to your various cloud apps through Microsoft Cloud App Security. It's going to broker that connection. All the traffic's going to go through Cloud App Security. And what this gives you is very, very granular information on the user's activity around and inside of that application. So for example, if they're logging into Teams, you can see what files and apps they're accessing. And this works for third-party applications as well, 16,000 of them. So you can see what your users are logging in to do inside of Salesforce. And not only can you monitor that activity, but Microsoft has a tremendous set of default rules for watching for suspicious activity, watching for data exfiltration, people going in there and stealing your files, watching for suspicious activity for an account that looks like it's been breached. And you can alert and take action based on these things. You can also enforce some very interesting control over actions. So again, if you're logging in from a managed company device, log into your apps, do whatever you want. If you're logging in from a personal device or a home computer or an unfamiliar IP address, you can log into the app still. You can browse your Teams, you can chat with your coworkers, but if you try to download a file, it's going to block it and say, sorry, based on the device that you're on, we're not permitting you to take that file outside of the company fence. You can even do things like blocking copy and paste. So if you copy some data from inside of a managed application, paste it into your notepad, what you paste is going to be, sorry, you're not allowed to do that. So you can do some very, very robust control around monitoring and security within your applications. And again, this is one of those higher tier security services. It's going to be in those E5 SKUs. All right, and Tracy, I'll hand it back to you for just a couple of minutes left for questions.
Awesome. Mr. Kevin, you want to go over any questions we may have and review our services and next steps on the Yeti cooler?
Yeah, you got it. And I do have one from Joe here, and he's using a third-party packet capture thing, Wireshark. And are those packets going to be larger headers due to the Office 365? I don't know if you know that answer or not, Trace, but I figured I'd ask.
I don't, but I can't imagine why they would be. I mean, traffic is traffic. I can't imagine why that header would be much bigger, but I've actually never tested that.
Okay. All right. Well, obviously, you know, we've given you a lot of information here in the hour that we spent with you, but we absolutely have the services to back it up. The Office 365 security assessment is, if you haven't done it, it is essential for you just to have at least some kind of foothold on where you are today around security in your Office 365 environment. Set up and configure cloud management gateway. And if you're using a lot of cloud apps like Ryan was telling you, it's a great way for you to actually start to control that environment. Develop a plan to assist in managing devices that are off the company network, because you know now, especially working from home, this is a big deal. Intune, I can't tell you how much that has helped the companies that we deal with, especially around that remote worker, and it is now within your SCCM licensing. So contact us, let us help you figure out what you have today. And you know, in a lot of cases, Tracy, tell me if I'm wrong, you already own them, we just help you get them up and running.
Exactly. That was the whole point of helping everyone understand what's included with that M365 license or included with SCCM today.
Right. And the co-management with SCCM and Intune is really integral to giving you that end-to-end protection that Tracy was talking about. Desktop analytics, and to demonstrate the advantages it improves with Windows 10 migration, we can absolutely do that for you. Create an enhanced OSDs for Windows 10 imaging or feature upgrades. And one thing that Tracy didn't mention was autopilot, which is part of the Intune, which allows you to actually push down your gold corporate image to a brand new device that might get delivered from a distributor or someone that you buy your hardware from. create enhanced software updates, ADR, peer caching, Windows updates, all of those things, we can help you set that up. And then enhance service rings for Windows 10 feature updates. We all know how quickly those things come. Now, next steps, you could start. There is a trial that you can actually get for the M365 SKU. It's 30 days. You can actually really put it through its paces, look at all the advanced security features, play with Intune, which is part of it. So it does come with all the EMS products that we talked about. Request a security assessment. You know, it's something that you should absolutely take a look at. Anyone that attended today's session here, we're going to be putting your names into a raffle. You'll find out from our marketing department actually who who won today. And if you have any questions, you can call us direct, or you can email us. We will be sending out this presentation and a link to the recording that we get done here. And Carla's got a question. Do we have Microsoft created an M365 E4? That is all the security of E5, but glitches, but I guess no phone stuff. Ryan or Tracy, you know anything about that?
I know it's in the works, and I know Microsoft is constantly changing their SKUs. I know they're trying to find a balance between the amount of security versus the telephony. I've been hearing that a lot too. People want the additional security the E5 brings, but don't necessarily need the telephony. I know it's in the works and in the roadmap. I'm not aware as of yet. Is it publicly available?
Yeah, I don't know either. But I will tell you that the phone stuff has been hot, especially with people working from home. If they have to call customers or vendors, they really don't like to use their home phone number now with phone IDs and using their cell phone to do the same thing. And a lot of people, the nice thing about being involved with a CSP like Champion is you could turn on phone plans, use them while you need them while people are working from home, and then turn them off later. And this way you do have corporate, a corporate number instead of, their personal number. Joe's got another question here for you. If I can sneak in one last question, he says,
sure.
When let's see, Azure AD into on-site AD, how much does that affect group policies already in place?
None, because essentially what you're doing is you're syncing your traditional Active Directory with Azure Active Directory, and all it's syncing are attributes. Group policies do not flow between Azure AD and on-prem AD. Now, you can utilize Intune to push group policies, but the synchronization of your traditional on-prem AD with Azure AD, there's no effects whatsoever on group policies. The big question is, how do you apply an Active Directory group policy to a remote end user who's not on the VPN or coming into the corporate office on occasion? You can push those group policies utilizing Intune.
Oh, so that's kind of the workaround if they can't communicate with the domain controllers on premise.
Exactly.
And do you do that through PowerShell?
That's all done through the Intune Management Console.
So no PowerShell whatsoever.
I'm not going to say that. Everything in Office 365 and Azure has some sort of PowerShell backend, as we all know, but the vast majority of that's GUI driven.
Okay, great. Thanks, Trace. I know we're a little bit over here. It's 4:03. I do appreciate everyone's time. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Tracy, for all your information. Like I said, any questions, please give us a call at the 877-788-1617, or you can email us anytime at info@messageops.com. With that, stay safe out there. Have a great rest of your week and take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.